Hello everyone, welcome to KSR Data Vision YouTube channel. So in this video, we'll see how Power BI will integrate with Azure and how it is going to integrate with AWS. So a lot of questions that most of you have, which cloud to use when you're doing a reporting, right? So obviously your BI tool Power BI can only do all the reportings, but you will have to get the data from somewhere else. And in the recent days, all the data is coming from cloud. Now, are we going to opt Azure or are we going to opt for AWS? That's a question now. Now let's see how Power BI will integrate well and why we are preferring Azure. And it's a straightforward answer. Power BI is also a Microsoft product and Azure is also a Microsoft product. But if you take about AWS, it's a different cloud. Now let's see some of the features why Power BI with Azure is most preferred than the other one. Now in this particular video, we'll see the discussion about how AWS and Azure connectors are linked with Power BI. And we'll see some of the comparison, why always your Azure with Power BI has an upper hand. And at last, we'll see the pros and cons. To get started, if you are connecting to Power BI and you go to a get data option, these are the options that is available particularly with respect to Azure. There is a separate connectors called Azure and where you can see the connectors like Azure SQL Databases, Synapses, block storage, table storage, Cosmos, Data Explorer, and HT Insight. You can also connect your Databricks, Delta tables. So there's a lot of features that you can see here when you're connecting with Azure. And as I said, Azure is also a Microsoft product. Power BI is also a Microsoft product. So it provides a native connectors. You need not have any custom connectors or any implementation for connectors. Directly, you can go to the get data option and you can see almost 15 to 16 services you can connect to your Power BI. And even you can build a machine learning algorithm where the data is present in a table and directly you can pull it. Now that's where your Power BI with Azure has always an advantage. But on the other hand, if I go and show you the AWS connectors, maximum it's 3, and that is also there is another one which is in a beta version, but you can connect to a AWS Athena and AWS Redshift. Now Redshift is a data warehousing system that is present in your AWS, just like what your Synapses can do in Azure. The same thing your Redshift can do it in Amazon. So there, if you see, you can get the data from there. And apart from that, you can get the data from Athena. Athena is a serverless SQL connection. Now, only with these two ways you can get the data directly. If you want to connect to anything else, now that is where you will have to do a lot of custom connectors. You will have to implement a lot of custom connectors. Now that's a major setback with respect to AWS, right? In terms of connectors. Now, why does your Power BI with Azure always has an upper hand? As I told you, for both of them, they have a same parent, which is nothing but Microsoft. And your Microsoft connectors along with your Power BI has a one common directory where you can have your credentials created and you can easily access it. We have a ADD, which is nothing but Azure Active Directory. In the recent times, it is also called Intra ID, where you can set up the users directly for Power BI and Azure at one place. And as I told you, it can connect up 15 to 16 services. And most importantly, the security is top notch with respect to your Azure. And coming to the cost optimization, in the recent times, you all have heard about Fabric as well. Fabric comes with a one centralized licensing system. And now the licensing and the cost optimization is also comparatively, it is better when we compare it with AWS. And that is one thing. And it also integrates well with all the Power Platform ecosystems, not only Power BI. You can take a Power Apps, Power Automate, all of this can be well integrated with Power BI. That's an advantage. And performance wise, it is always giving you a better performance because both connectivity is easy and you'll also get a lot of support from community support, documentation, any issues you have with respect to Azure and Power BI. We have a community where we can go and get the solutions for that, right? So all of this is making Power BI and Azure an upper hand. Now, what about AWS? AWS is another cloud, right? You will gel with your family member easily than the other family, right? Now that's where your AWS with Power BI has some of the trouble. Now, if I want to compare the features of native integrator, authentication, performance, licensing, cost benefits, security, and complaints, if you see that Azure always has a upper hand in terms of providing seamless native integration. But if you talk about AWS, AWS needs some custom connectors. You need to set up some connectors manually. That's a problem. Now comes with authentication. As I said, both comes under a single parent. So they have a Azure Active Directory where you can establish the user's details. But here you need some manual setup followed by performance. It is always optimized because it's a within family. But if you go with AWS, it has to move from another cloud. So obviously there is some delay expected. That is where we call it as a latency issue. Followed by licensing, everything is been bundled together. Cost is also optimized because both Azure and Power BI comes under one umbrella. But if you talk about AWS, AWS is always a costly one. And along with that, you need to buy a license for Power BI and then take care of the storage. So it's a separate billing. The cost is increased. And finally, for the security and compliance, it's tightly coupled, whereas in AWS, it's a more complex. Even today, I can say that AWS is the best cloud in this market, but still, when comes with Power BI, Azure and Power BI leads the market. Now, this video is not only for the students or who are learning to compare it, but this is also for the organizations. If you are opting to choose a cloud for your Power BI, well, with my research, I can tell you that please go with Azure with Power BI. It has a lot of features and benefits for your integration. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. We'll be back with few more videos.